My name is Daniel Hoffer. I'm a managing director at Autotech Ventures, and we are an early stage venture capital firm focused exclusively on ground transportation. We are investors in Mostafa's company, Swvl, and so I have the pleasure to interview him as he is in Dubai, and we will learn about his the secrets to his success and what got us so excited to invest in his company. So Mostafa, on that note, tell me about Swvl and tell the audience about Swvl. What do you do, and in which countries do you operate, and how much money have you raised so far, so people have a sense of the stage?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dan, for interviewing me. I'm really honored to be part of the Marketplace conference. It's my first time and super excited. So I'm Mostafa Kandil. I'm the founder of Swvl. Basically, Swvl, we build mass transit. So the problem in emerging markets is that there is a big middle class that's struggling on a daily basis to commute. People who basically make $500 a month, and $500 a month in a city like Cairo, for example, or a city like Lagos, could be actually the salary of an engineer or a doctor, for example. So if you make $500 a month and you have to pay $20 a day just to go to work and come back taking an Uber, it's a very big chunk of your salary that you really cannot do on a daily basis. Taking the public transportation is also not really an option. Most of the countries, in emerging markets countries, either don't have a functioning systems, or even if they do, it's quite inhumane. A bus that should carry 50 people carries on average 200 people. So that basically causes for women, a lot of safety issues, a lot of reliability issues, etc. So what we found is that the governments in emerging markets kind of the capability to build public transportation. They don't have the financial power, and even if they do, they'd rather invest it in things that are much more pressing, such as education or healthcare. And in these markets, there are fleets of very that are buses that work with corporates, schools, universities, and very, very seasonal. So what we do in a nutshell, we build our own mass transit. We take these buses that are underutilized from the private sector, and we create a parallel network to the governments, basically. We just celebrated 3 years. We've grown from 3 people, now we're 700 across 4 countries. We've raised close to $100 million 3 years. We're one of the most well-funded startups across Middle East and Africa. And we've grown, we do hundreds of thousands of, so one of the biggest movers of people, actually probably in the world even, and we're definitely the biggest in the bus space.
And so roughly how many trips do you do in a single day?
Hundreds of thousands.
Very nice. That's a large operation. And so when you are growing your customer base and the demand side specifically, helping everyone get to work every day, or school or wherever it is, are you marketing to consumers, to the riders, or corporations, or both? Who is your real customer here?
We have 3 categories internally, basically. So pretty much we have 3 companies inside Swvl. One that's completely B2C, which what we call is where you can hail Swvl off the street. So you book, you can go for a meeting point, etc., etc. You have your own seat, etc. 2 is the B2B side of things, which it's transport as a service, and falls under that corporates, schools, universities. We're launching now governments, a government like the governments of Egypt, for example, that is not really operates the same pretty much as us as Swvl. We operate with 1/100 the number of employees. So it's completely a very inefficient operation side. So basically helping governments do so. Basically. And that's the B2B kind of side of things. And then we have the intercity category, which is basically connecting. We build an intracity network, and then once we have a viable size, we connect the city in the mega cities that we serve with other cities in the country. And those are kind of the 3 on the most. We have 2 main demand teams. We have a marketing team that's focused on building the brand side of things. And we invest heavily in the brand itself because public transportation, the moment I tell you public transportation in a city like Cairo or a city like Lagos, the pictures that pop up in my mind is that people hanging out of the bus, women getting harassed, all of that, which is very, very hard to brand public this is actually for the cool people only. So this is kind of one team, and both data science team, on building kind of tools that can help us automate how we do marketing, that can help us understand our consumer behavior even more, that can help us how do we real-time price our service, and how can we price it, and becomes like a complete yield management operation.
Mm-hmm. Very good. We just lost your video, or at least I did. Maybe
I can see you, and video is live. Can you see me?
Not right now, but we can still hear you. So I guess that's the most important thing.
No. I didn't change anything. I can see you.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't see you anymore, but it seems like other people can see you, so that's good. I've already seen you before, so that's fine. Good. Okay. Well, let's continue then. So thank you for explaining that. It seems like you are. And my apologies. You've now completely disappeared. All right. Looks like we lost Mostafa. Hopefully he will join again. Please stand by as he rejoins from Dubai. I see the comments in the thread. Oscar, I don't think it's on my side.
For some reason, I got kicked out of the meeting.
Right. Okay. So continuing. So one of the things that I think is really interesting is you have, from what I understand from our past conversations, you have some cities in where you have a sort of a hub and spoke model, where in terms of how you design the way that people get to. The way you design your technology and the way you relate to your customers getting around, you have to route everyone from multiple pickup points to multiple destinations in as efficient a way as possible. And so you've done that in some cities with a hub and spoke kind of model, yeah. But other cities have a different commuting pattern, a different transportation pattern with lots of intra-city commuting.
Yeah.
So maybe you can talk about what that means and how you design your technology to be flexible enough to accommodate the different transit profiles of multiple cities, because I would think technologically that must be very complex.
Yeah. So actually, what we found is actually the 3 types of cities in our case, and that's what we have found so far. We're in 6 mega cities. We're in Cairo, Alexandria, Nairobi, Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, and what we found, there are these mega cities such as Cairo, for example. It's a 25 million people city, and it's quite huge actually. So that most of the commuting in the city is pretty much district to district, right? So the people are going from district A to district B, and that's a very efficient operations, because that means that you can plan a certain kind of a ride or a certain plan for a captain. We call our drivers captains, basically. So a captain can start from point district A, go to district B, and then once he reaches district B, he can find a highly utilized trip that's going from B to C, and then from C to D, and then from C to A again, right? So that's a very efficient operation, and that was kind of the first variation of cities. We launched with Cairo. Then when we expanded to Alexandria, we found out that there's actually, Alexandria is pretty much there's a strip. It's a strip on the coast, right? And that means that there are 3 main roads, 3 main highways, and people just commute across those 3 highways. And that means that we had to plan our city accordingly. And of course, there are a lot of kind of complexities with that, especially with the pricing side of things. And then there's a certain type of cities, which is like Nairobi, for example, where everybody commutes from the suburbs every day towards the CBD, the central business district, basically. And then that's kind of the most complex way of cities, because that means when you get to in the morning peak, when people are going to work, you can have very high going from A to B. But then if you need the second round of trips that's going from B to C, right? So going from the central business district towards kind of to the outer skirts of the cities, that makes it very, very complex, right? So what we had to do is 2 things. How is that very efficient? How can we make sure we can give the captains more and more trips per day and still to allow them to make enough money to cover basically the minimum viable earnings, and at the same time,
drivers, right?
The drivers.
Captains are drivers. Yeah.
Captains are the drivers. Yes. And so basically, to give them enough business that this becomes viable to them, while for us we can create where these trips can become profitable for us, right? So that was the first challenge, and the second challenge is how do we basically price all of this, right? So they're different to maximize revenue, right? And the second one for us was kind of the easier part to kind of figure out. And what we've developed is there are two layers of pricing. Layer one is the two types of pricing. It's broken down into two types of pricing. There's a fixed pricing, which is route going from A to B. We're going to price it on a price per kilometer like that. And there's going to be, it's an upfront pricing. You know exactly kind of you're going from A to B, how much you're going to pay. And then there's the second level of pricing where you basically, it's based on how long do you commute, what's the waiting time, all of that, then we charge you accordingly. And then we found out that we've been able to kind of cater for both types of cities with those types of pricing, but still there's room to maximize revenue, right? To even to get more and more out of this. So what we've developed is that, which was very relevant kind of for the second type of cities that basically people can hop on, hop off. We started utilizing the seats much more than once, right? So we started creating the circulation, a bus that has 10 seats. We started filling 12 or 13 people inside that. And then we found out there's actually even more opportunity, which we've seen with airlines, basically. And the way, if you look at airlines, basically, you see that if you book very early, the price is very low. And as the plane gets more and more kind of utilized, they actually keep increasing the pricing even more, and they start getting more kind of revenue out of it. So we started actually developing a yield management system. Basically, it's completely, we can in advance predict what will be the utilization on these routes. If we know that this is going to be a highly utilized route regardless, then there's no need to do any sort of discounting, and we can keep increasing the pricing as we go. So it becomes like a surge pricing. And in cases that trip time is very, very, we're just about, the trip is about to start and still there's seats available, we can actually in that case even drop the pricing. So it works in like a peak, non-peak, or a surge, negative surge kind of scenario to max with an objective function to maximize the margin on these buses on a per ride level, basically. So that's on the pricing component. On the planning component, it's actually got even more complex than that. Some cities do have route permits, for example. There's a city like Nairobi, for example. There are certain concessions of not that you have with a certain kind of corporation that only has concessions with these routes, so you cannot work with any other kind of buses except the buses that have already the concession and the route permits ready. So what we built is that the routing engines basically that take all the data from all the data points basically from kind of all the aggregation platforms that we do have, takes that, clusters it in a way, and basically gets us kind of the key routes that we should have. Once we have these key routes, it automatically works on an optimization, with an objective function basically to maximize the most efficient plans. A captain comes to Swvl, basically just puts where he lives on our map, and then automatically it spits out how much money he wants to make as well, and then it spits out basically what would be kind of the most ideal, most efficient way for him to commute around the city. This is basically, we gather kind of two types of data. Spatial data basically to know how the route should look like, where should it be kind of structured, how should it be structured. We gather time data based on, we have time filters across, so we can, from the time filters, we know exactly when does a customer want to book, right? So we have both data points. Once we have a route, it comes to basically the second part of the technology, which is we know that I was going from A to B. The route then basically gets created real time. So we have a certain kind of confidence, let's say a confidence rate of 70% that the routes are going to look like this. But there's we have a cloud of stations along the route basically that we kind of preset in advance. And based on the existing demand, the route gets shaped real time to maximize even more kind of the utilization of these routes.
That's incredible. I'm in awe of the complexity of your technology platform because not many founders are struggling with expanding, from their first city to their second or third city, And then in your case, you're expanding across countries with multiple languages and multiple currencies. And then in addition, you've got these cities, some of which have a hub and spoke model, some of them have an intra-city commuting model, and then it's an enormous amount of investment in technology infrastructure that enables you to work this magic.
Thank you.
And a huge barrier to entry, I would think, given how difficult it is to build something like that. Do you find it, to throw one other wrench into the mix, and an additional level of complexity, do you find that in addition, some of the customer demand is seasonal and maybe students, and so how do you flex to accommodate that, or is that already accommodated by the resiliency of the rest of the infrastructure?
Yes, so luckily, actually, so it's actually quite seasonal. Of course, as you exactly mentioned, there's a bit of seasonality that we have to kind of cater for here. We are a commuting business as of now, so we cater for two main types of consumers: people who are going to work, people who are going to schools and universities, and that means that once basically once the fall or the spring semesters are over, overnight you lose a chunk of demand. Right? Luckily, we're going super fast. So we always make it up very, very quickly, but there's at a steady state scenario, a steady state case, there's basically a portion of demand that you lose, right? So that means that potentially you hold an inventory, right? If you lose a certain utilization, that means that your margins can go substantially down. So how do you solve for that? So what we've built is that part of this actually, there's a demand projection model that kind of is built on top of that. And there's a churn prediction model. This demand prediction can tell us in advance when is the expected seasonality is about to happen, right? So it can take the patterns. If you look at a year-to-year kind of data, you can very, very clearly see where the patterns, how do patterns develop in every city, right? And you can very clearly see which routes that you can potentially will be hurt by lower utilization because of the seasonal demand. So we can preempt, let's say, by a week or 2 weeks in advance, that we have this portion of routes and this portion of supply that potentially will have very low utilization levels on that time. And what we've built is what we call allocation APIs, and these allocation APIs is connected to what we call our network optimization engine. And these allocation APIs can real-time, basically, can identify kind of these routes that we have that are going to kind of be less utilized and repurpose these vehicles on the higher utilized routes. We've also built on top of that, from the consumer side, a churn prediction model that has around 75% accuracy, basically, that can tell us who's about to churn. So we know that our consumer demand, our chunk of demand that has to do with schools or universities, are going to churn at that time. So we know that they don't have a use case right now because they're basically off. So this is kind of the chunk of demand that we can re-engage once the school semester again is over, starts again. So those ones will be going back to them with a certain kind of incentive or a certain kind of push to resurrect them once the school demand is back on.
Mm-hmm. And how do you? I mean, we're talking at a very high level here, but for the founders in the audience who are not quite as far along, how do you start from the basics, just in terms of figuring out where the user demand is in each of your cities?
So for us, in our case, I think there was a lot of experimentation. I think something that we're good at from day one is that we've hired a lot of people who are advanced analysts or / data scientists, basically, and that was kind of the spirit across the organizations. That every team, everywhere inside the organization, basically people can code, people can know kind of how to manipulate data, how can they create the most basic tools. So even regardless of how kind of strong our engineering was, but our operations teams, our growth teams, all our kind of the category teams, all of these teams that basically are responsible for the operations, they're also as good as the engineering teams, and they're also data scientists or very strong analysts, right? So they were able to understand how to use the data. So what this allowed us to do is, the operations teams, the ones who were able to see the problems, the front lines, basically, and see the problems from such a model that there's no kind of one to be inspired from. There's no Uber, there's no Careem, there's no Ola, there's none of these companies that cracked these problems before, were the first ones to track it. So that means that all of these teams had to have a very strong knowledge of what's happening on the front line and how can we take that, translate it, understand the data very well, and MVP products that once proven successful with a very, very strong, with a very kind of high speed of iterations, basically. Once we've proven successful, we take and productize with the engineering team. So I think that's kind of the key for us, was to hire very, very strong kind of analysts / data science across the board, even in operation teams and category teams, et cetera, and a strong product team. And initially we had the product team clubbed with actually the operations team on the same umbrella and the same management. So for us, the way we're looking at is that operations were solving the problem for the short term, but the product was solving the problems for the long term, basically. So we see the problems that automatically arise, what do we need to solve for, operations will solve for it, and product then takes this case on the product. And then comes the growth team, that's their job is to push the operations team to always need to catch up, basically, in terms of our tech, and everything needs to catch up with how our operations are evolving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's amazing. And so I know we should transition into Q&A shortly, but do you have any favorite growth hacks that's had a massive impact for you that might be of relevance to the audience?
Yes. So for us, it's the biggest growth hack was actually localization, right? So understanding the local needs of these markets and catering for that. So for example, when we launched Swvl, we were completely credit card and debit card based, but we found out quickly that this allows us to tap into a very, very small percentage of the society, and kind of there's a huge captive audience that we're not able to tap into just because of that payment method, right? So we're quickly able to adapt with things such as introducing cash pricing, for example, things such as that. And this was very, very useful to us. Other things such as how do we lock consumers into long-term commitments, for example. So how do we change our game from a ride-to-ride level, a booking-to-booking level, to a month-to-month level. So you have to buy, let's say, a package or something that you have to stick around with us. And we found that at least there's 4x kind of increased tips per user, basically, if he just buys a package versus we found out that the retention rates almost increased by 40-50%, actually, just because he got into a longer-term commitment, right? And so things such as that. We've also found that pricing was a very, very strong lever for us. And the moment we were able to kind of understand pricing more, understand how can we utilize pricing, and how can we, in the end, basically kind of generate more demand just because of pricing, without on a net level, we're still making the same margins. I think those were kind of the key things for us. I see some questions here. If you want, we can jump into them as well.
Yeah, go ahead. I'd just comment that I've always been impressed by the way you iterate and the data science culture that you've cultivated. So it's a very data-driven culture at Swvl, and I think that's been really useful to you guys. I'm noticing a couple questions from Eric. Data scientists need data. How do you gather the demand side data kind of in the first place?
Yes. I think that's the data science are kind of the evolution of that, right? So the analyst who comes on board, and basically the analyst's job are to understand whatever data you gather, right? So gathering data, you need to build kind of all of the data aggregation platforms that we do have. And for us, one key thing that we're focused on from day one is how do we collect as much data as we can? How do we connect all our sources of data, build the right data lakes, basically, that all analysts and everyone inside the company can consume. So that was one for us. And initially the focus was just understanding backwards, right? Everything that's happening, how do we take this? How do we make sure that we have a granular view over every bit of the operations level? Once we kind of grown as a company and our data starts to become a lot more valuable, now we have almost 350, 400,000 monthly active users, basically. The amount of data becomes valuable enough that you can actually predict the future. But initially, the need is not really to predict much, it's just to understand whatever is going on. And once you develop enough understanding and you have enough data, then the data analyst, the data scientist becomes in place. So, and that's why I was saying there were basically analysts advanced analysts / data scientists, right? But there's no point in developing. Most of the problems can be solved with analytics, right? And there's no need to solve everything with machine learning or AI or any of that, right? Like that's there's no need, right? It's over complexity for nothing, and it just takes a lot of time. While basic analytics and can actually solve the problems for that. So what I was saying is that the investment in data collection from day one, the investment in the right culture of people who understand, who have kind of no dependency on each other when it comes to data understanding, when it comes to data manipulation. That's kind of one. People who can understand what are the, regardless of where they are, how can they develop tools and iterate on these tools on their own without the need for engineers and engineering effort, basically, because as we know, engineering effort is a bit more rigid, right? Like you develop like quarterly roadmaps, and these roadmaps, engineers have like a very strong culture. Like if you disrupt these roadmaps or anything, they become like a bit. They don't really like it. So we have kind of the operations teams and all of that works more on a hustle mode. And they understand that they have the same powers as the engineers, but they're more on a hustle mode. And once things are proven, once things are successful, they can take these and to a certain level of kind of confidence and give it to a product team that plays its role with the engineering team to basically productize all of that.
Mm-hmm. And we're running out of time here, but briefly, again, shifting a little bit from high level to sort of tactical, what tech stacks do you use, and are there any specific products that have enabled this level of agility and complexity?
So tech stacks from like a back end, front end, and all of that perspective,
I'm thinking from the audience founder's perspective. They're thinking, how can I be like Mostafa?
Well, I'm not very technical, so don't corner me. So I think there's a lot that you can do with Python, R, and SQL, basically. I think those are kind of the key critical things. And this is kind of from a data manipulation, data understanding perspective. Of course, from an engineering perspective, building products and all of that, we use Scala, we use Go, we use Node.js, we use kind of Angular, etc. on the front end, we use Kotlin, we use Swift, all of that, and on the front, back end, all of that. But I think from an analyst, from data science, all of that perspective, I think there's a lot that you can do with R, Python, and SQL. That's in my view.
And last question: how do you manage, since you're always kind of flexing and tweaking, that can impact the customer experience as well, maybe their route changes and so on. So how do you manage customer expectations, and if the customers are ended up on different buses going in different places, presumably they all get to work at the end of the day. Yeah. Within a reasonable time frame, but do you see, do customers feel what's going on kind of on the back end, and how do they feel about it?
So for some things they do, things such as pricing, for example, things such as dynamic routing, for example. These are things that directly kind of impacts the experience. We have our promise teams, what we call the promise teams, and these are we make key promises. One is so fulfillment promise. Two is that we're going to show up on time. So showing up on time is in emerging markets. This problem in San Francisco doesn't exist as much, but in a city like Cairo, where the average commute is 2 hours and everything is extremely unreliable, even the captain can just 10 minutes before the trip switches off his phone and not show up. It's a very tough thing to make over 4,000 buses, right, at the same time. It's a very, very tough thing to make. So building kind of the initially, kind of when we launch our market, we fall back to Google Maps. We use all of these kind of APIs and services to kind of get the best case estimate. But as we build up, basically, we develop a more understanding of factors such as different capacities or different sizes of buses have certain different maneuverabilities, right? Different driving speeds of captains impact the promise in a different way. So we take all of these data and real time, basically, we perfect our promise even more. And we measure kind of what's the variation from the promise that we give across every station across the route. And we keep perfecting that over time. So the things that we solve from a product perspective, such as developing kind of the promise platform, our promise platform, and the things that we fix from an operation perspective by kind of deductions, bonuses, kind of behavioral, kind of carrots and sticks, basically. to solve for from our operation perspective. We try as much as possible whenever there's a problem that can be solved from the operation side. We try to kind of save our engineering effort, save every effort that we think is scarce to solving kind of other problems. So as much as possible, we try to solve things from operation perspective before anything.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I think we're out of time, but thank you so much, Mostafa. Very educational and inspirational. Thank you for joining us today.
Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time, guys, and I'm honored to be part of this. Take care.
Take care.